Andrew Zimmern is a chef, restaurateur, and television host. You most likely know him as the host of the travel channel's Bizarre Foods. Andrew hosts Family Dinner on Magnolia Network and Andrew Zimmern's Wild Game Kitchen on the Outdoor Channel. You can also sign up for his Substack newsletter, Spilled Milk. Please help me welcome Andrew Zimmern to the show. Welcome to the Poisoning Podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, this is so exciting. So I am based in West Virginia. So a sort of outside the coastal area, and you're in Minneapolis. And I love for you to tell our listeners how you ended up there.
Oh gosh, I'm jealous you're in West Virginia, one of my favorite places in the whole world.
It's a beautiful place.
Not enough people go to West Virginia. I adore
agree.
it. The closest I've ever come to buying land over the last 30 years outside of the state of Minnesota has been West Virginia.
It makes me so happy to hear. I sing its praises all the time.
Twice. It's amazing.
It's a beautiful place. No one thinks of the beauty here. And I see turkeys fly quite a bit. And I don't think many people see a turkey fly.
We do here in Minnesota. The turkeys walk around on the ground, and then at night they roost in the trees. And at sunset, when there's guests at my dining room table and they look out and they're like, "What the fuck was that?" And I'm like, "Turkeys." And they're like, "They were flying." And I'm like, yeah turkeys fly.
In nature, they fly. Oh, and this is my last thing. Saw a bald eagle Wednesday. We stopped.
We got bald eagles out the wazoo here. I mean, this is
I see them a few times a year. It's pretty awesome, but people who live in cities never see these things unless they go to the zoo.
A lot of our people who live around me are afraid. They have little dogs, like little dogs.
Oh,
and they see videos of, big bald eagles carting away newborn fawns, which weigh 3 times what their dogs weigh. And I'm telling them all the time, like, don't just, open the back door and let Daisy out because you have, the perimeter collar mechanism on so she won't run away. You need to worry about eagles. How did I wind up in Minnesota? I guess it's a very typical story for a lot of people, but atypical for me. Longtime alcoholic, longtime drug addict, user of people, taker of things, homeless person, street thief, absolutely irredeemable human being, checked into a hotel room the last week of January 1992, second to last week in January, and then and tried to kill myself. It didn't work. And 3 days later, I was on a plane to Center City, Minnesota, and went to Hazelden, a phenomenal place of miracles, and got sober, stayed sober, got dry, stayed sober, and here we are talking. It's this is how ego-driven alcoholics are. I made a note on my calendar when I would have 12,000 days. I don't know. It seemed like a really good big number. It seemed round, 12. I don't know. It just seemed like I was like, oh, cool, 12,000 days, and I missed it. It was yesterday. So today I have 12,001 days, which I'm glad I missed. Thank you. It's because it is sort of a one day at a time thing, and it's that one, I guess, is the important thing. But yeah, that's I made a promise to a friend of mine that I would. Well, he said, "Don't move back." He said, "Make me a promise." I said, "Sure. What? Depends." He said, "Well, you can move back to New York when your life gets better, when you have 1 year that sucks more than the previous one." I'm like, okay. and 32 years later, here I am. So I guess Minnesota and sobriety is a good mix for me.
It's I think it's an amazing feat because alcohol is advertised and pushed to us everywhere. All the vices are, right? Now that advertising is
Yeah,
on every social media platform, it's just in front of you all the time.
yeah.
Unless,
I
there are
mean,
some people who turn it off.
yeah, even, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, obviously, alcohol is socialized in a way that other substances aren't. How, but what's even crazier to me is that, I mean, if alcohol, if vodka was invented today, if you and I invented
Yeah.
vodka and we got it in front of the FDA or whatever for clearance, and we had a beautiful, shiny bottle, and it looked great, and a wonderful
Yeah.
marketing campaign, and you know we had sold George Clooney 10% of our company, so he was
Yeah.
all on board to market it for us. Um, the 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 USDA, the FDA would classify it. It would be a class 4 or 5 narcotic. It would be beyond. It would be harder to get than heroin. And the reason being, there would be no medical reason to have it in a hospital. While in fact there are some very strong opioids, heroin-ish,
Mm-hmm.
that are used in the medical profession. My life, my story, I mean, was awful and just kept going downhill from the time I was 14 years. I didn't see it all the time, but for the 16 years that I was using, it was basically a straight shot downhill. But it accelerated when I gave up drugs and just exclusively drank. I believe that alcohol is way more dangerous than a lot of the other substances that we talk about out there. It is
Sure.
absolute, um, uh, it's loony juice. I mean, truly. I have a lot of first responder and police friends, and over the years have done a lot of work with and for the police here in the Twin Cities. And when I first moved here, I met a gentleman who had just left being a beat cop, and he was made a sergeant. And I met him through mutual friends. And I saw him every couple of years, and he just kept rising up the ranks. He became the chief of police in St. Paul like 14 years ago. Uh, he then, after I think a decade doing that, moved to the state level and became a security advisor in our current governor's kitchen cabinet. And he and I would talk all the time about, he never responded to a violent crime, a felony, anything, beyond a traffic ticket where, uh, you know, weed, for example, was the source problem. He said he used to joke, if you bust down a door and there's a pile of weed and a frisbee, there's 5 people sitting on a couch giggling, watching cartoons. He said,
Okay.
but every single dangerous situation he's ever walked into involves alcohol and insert name of drug there. Um, and I think alcohol is sneakily, for something that's, to your point, advertised everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
um, a very, very dangerous substance hiding in plain sight. And for the life of me, I don't understand. Well, I do understand why. There's too much money involved, so you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Which is why I think it's very important that we don't allow other, you know, evil dragons to hide in plain sight in front of us, and why we need a lot more regulation around all types of different chemicals, so that we don't have more generations and a greater percentage of our generations of young people hijacked by these things. And I just say that simply as a matter of my own experience. Other people can have their opinions. I just know I'm right.
Aren't we all? But you hit on a point that I think a lot of voters agreed with, because there were several legalization of psychedelics, legalization of marijuana on the ballot in different states this year, and they all failed. And there was even, they even pulled back in California some of their legalization laws. I can't remember the prop name, but I do think we've lived in a period where we thought it was like a legal right and anything goes. But then the baggage that society gets from all of that, like now we have more young people smoking marijuana on a daily basis than ever before. When people see that legalization, people equate legalization with, well, then it's healthy, it's fine, it's good for me. And maybe
That's
that's
correct. No,
not the right way to look
look,
at it.
people can argue about, about weed and all kinds of things,
Sure.
having to do with it in different stats, and at what age and for whom and by whom and in what amounts, and it's there are people who are way more expert than I am. I just know for sure that in the hierarchy, if I'm playing one of those creative society games online,
Yes.
and you have 20 different substances and you have to bring one of them into your society, I pick weed every single time.
Okay.
Uh, only because the alternatives, all the other things listed there, including alcohol, my opinion, 20 times more dangerous. Now, do I believe that we have to have stricter laws around the ideas of legalization? Absolutely. Is there access too soon, too early? Absolutely. Uh, do I think that when it comes to legalization of marijuana, we should be paying more attention to gun laws and how we're treating those? Absolutely. Um, I think we waste a lot of time in this country, civically, arguing about things that uh, are certainly on the list of things that need to be talked about and legislated. However, there's things above them that we better talk about and legislate first, right?
Okay.
Gun laws, immigration, things like that. I will say that and I always bring this up with people, the foie gras wars that have been raging in this country for 30 years. Are a perfect example of it. And, not trying to switch gears here, but,
Yeah.
0.0000001% of the population ever gets to see real foie gras.
Right.
It's expensive. It is it's quote unquote only in the most expensive of restaurants. So few people come in contact with it. So to spend legislative time
I'm on it.
banning it,
Right.
uh, when in fact we should take a look at chickens that are kept in cages their entire life. Much worse, by the way, sold in every supermarket, and every single family in America buys them. Well, at least the
99-cent
families that
eggs, right?
have a food life.
Yeah.
That is a horrific thing that we need to be paying more attention to. And I think the parallel in the world of legal and illegal substances, I think that's similar. There's a lot of things we need to be paying more attention to. I was very happy to see some of the laws that would allow for a greater and freer use of psychedelia to be shut down. And I say this as someone who does believe in the medicinal effects of them. I do
Sure.
believe in the I had no consequences from my psychedelic use as a young man. That doesn't mean other people didn't have any. I can just only speak from my own experience. But they are very, very powerful chemicals, and we
Exactly.
don't know enough about them. And I think that's where the rubber hits the road for me as
Well, it's like fentanyl. Fentanyl is a good medicine when administered by a doctor, say for an epidural. Most women have had them if they've had an epidural. It's not good, an illicit street drug, because it could kill you like that.
Yeah, it's very scary. Obviously as the father of a about to be not a teenager anymore, these things are of great concern to me. Statistically, the numbers that I see are absolutely petrifying, and I think for parents who bury their heads in the sand and think, well, not in my community,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's that's probably our biggest problem specific to fentanyl. If people understood, if we could show a thermal imaging map and everywhere that was glowing was where this drug was available, I think parents would flock to whatever polling place, whatever gathering place, whatever, and we would move very quickly to make sure that there were much tighter controls around it. Um, you know, when you talk about something that in quote unquote small amounts, physically small amounts, can kill someone,
Yeah.
fentanyl is right up there. It's the king, and I can't. It does everything but keep me up at night, and the only reason it doesn't keep me up at night is I have a spiritual practice that has taught me not to worry about those types of things in lieu of taking care of myself. But it
Sure.
is a frightening and scary fact of life, and it affects everybody regardless of class or age, which is even scarier.
Yeah. So, do you have naloxone? Do you keep it in your house, in your car, in your place of business by chance?
Narcan, I believe,
Yes.
is at our office.
Good. It's the only thing that can bring someone back, have the chance of bringing someone back. So I'm glad you
Yeah,
have it there.
it's pretty incredible. The kind of like COVID tests. I think it's a fascinating topic of what should and shouldn't be recommended to people um, for personal safety in terms of ownership. And it, quite frankly, if I lived in a different place than I do now, even in my own city, I probably, just from a good Samaritan standpoint, carry some around with me. Only because it is miraculous what it can do.
Gives people second chances.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to talk about someone that you know who died of fentanyl, Prince. Could you tell us some stories about him?
Well, one
How
of
did you meet
my
him? Let's
one of
tell
my
us, how
favorite
did you meet him?
at Paisley Park. I one day I got invited to show up to one of his parties. I guess I had you know become a well-known enough Minnesotan, and his in Eden Prairie, where Paisley Park, that had a public component, and his house was also located. Um, there was he would have these amazing parties, and it was probably about 10 minutes from my house. And I was making bizarre foods, and got invited to go out to Paisley Park. And so I immediately, you couldn't get me there fast enough. Number one, because I was a huge fan, had seen him in concert dozens of times, and just loved everything that he did. And I I'm a pop culture junkie, from an experience standpoint. I go see bands that couldn't care less about their music. But if they're monumentally huge, if they're culturally important, I want to go see what that's all about, right?
Yeah.
And here was someone who had, both my full attention as a music lover, but also someone who I was desperate to see if everything that I'd heard about these shindigs was correct. And fabulous, incredible music. The first time that I actually got to meet him was I was there. The night got away from me. I was sitting on a couch in a room talking to people, and I didn't see him come in, and he walked up and introduced himself to me, and thank you for having me at your events. I have so much fun every time I come here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he had notoriously persnickety dietary habits and desires, and
he was a thin individual, but in
well,
shape. I
yes,
mean,
and
his performing was
if I remember
amazing.
the later half of his life, I think he was I want to say vegan,
Okay.
but the fact of the matter is that it wasn't so much the size; it was what he chose. And of course, when I was talking with him, he was Bizarre Foods was sort of in its heyday and was a very big popular show, and that he had watched it. Just Bob, he goes, "I'll watch you eat it. I won't eat it." And he made some funny joke and walked away shaking his head. And I just remember for months floating like 2 inches off the ground because the idea that Prince knew who I was and knew what the
Right.
work that I did was just a mind boggler to me. The Interestingly, to give people an idea, he was the Minnesotan that no one ever saw, only because he led a very hermit-like existence here in the Twin Cities when he wasn't touring. So if you saw Prince, it was a really big deal. To to be out at Paisley Park and to see the different bands and the different groups that he was producing, working with, trying to develop, outplaying in a private concert venue was something that as a music geek, I'll never forget and treasure for as long as I live. And in a weird set of circumstances, I was in a meeting at the mayor's office, and we've had some wonderful mayors in the Twin Cities, some really great leaders, and currently we have Mayor Fry. When I first moved here, people like Sharon Sales Belton and R.T. Ryback were really fantastic, fantastic mayors. And we've been really lucky. We've been really, really, really lucky to have some truly, truly incredible people here. The Several of them have become pretty good friends of mine, and the mayor of the Twin Cities when Prince passed away was an incredible, incredible woman named Betsy Hodges. And I was working on some stuff regarding our farm markets.
Hmm.
And it was, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
weird.
listening.
The one of the things that was really interesting to me was the um, how we were operating our farmers markets here in the Twin Cities. And our mayor put together a couple people. We stopped, my now business partner and I stopped by her office, and we were in the middle of a meeting with her when her aides rushed in. And it was as if she had seen a ghost, and clearly something was really wrong. And she looked at us and she said, "Prince is dead."
Hmm.
And we sat there for 15, 20 minutes in her office while she sort of dealt with what was a true emergency situation, sort of triaging public safety issues, the idea of people flocking to Paisley Park. Like
Oh, yeah.
people don't understand that there's a ton of stuff that has to go on in the wake of something like that in any big metropolitan area. And right before she kicked us out of her office, because she realized once she got certain things squared away, she's like, "Oh, you guys are still here. You need to leave." But I remember her speaking to the Minnesota Department of Transportation as we were being exited, telling them that because it was early afternoon, the sun still hadn't set, that every light in the Twin Cities that could be purple should be purple. And
Hmm.
it wound up being sort of the signature moment of that first night was as the sun went down, the whole city, the bridges, public lamps, everything went purple, which was quite something. I'll never forget it.
Wow. Why don't you think he, well, from what I've heard and read, he was having hip pain. He was a great performer. But when you're a certain age, it's harder to do splits without after effects. Um, why don't you think he had the money and resources to probably have surgery easily and good surgery, Um, but he chose pills.
Yeah, I don't, I have no idea. I mean, um, and I mean, this is what's fascinating about tragedy. It's what's fascinating about history. It's what's fascinating about when they merge, uh, because we'll never know, and
Yeah,
there's way too many what ifs. Um,
sure.
I I know that there have been umpteen Prince projects, uh, that have tried to be created over the last uh, 5, 6, 7 years. That I was eager to see because I thought, well, maybe we'll learn some
Yeah.
things that we didn't know before, but so far to date, nothing. And as I understand it, um, family members and business associates are very busy squashing every um, uh, biopic, unauthorized book, etc., um, that they can, not to keep secrets. I don't
Sure.
think they're trying to cover anything up. I just think they want his privacy respected.
I get that. I just think his story might be able to save some folks or convince them to make different decisions at the end
Well,
of the day.
something. I mean that's a very interesting topic. I mean, does Matthew Perry's death, help people make a better decision?
Maybe, I
Do
mean,
any of
ketamine is,
do any of the I mean, we have so many prominent public people who we lose every year
yes.
to a whole variety of mental health issues, in which I place alcoholism and chemical dependency. Um, do you know an addict is going to do what an addict is going to do. Otherwise, people would say, "Oh no, I shouldn't ski down a sheet of ice. I may fall and break my leg." Most people, they don't want to break their leg. But when we're talking about, addictive behaviors, it no one's experience is going to convince you to stop, because whatever your addictive behaviors are, for me it was my drugs and alcohol, are constantly reminding me in my head that I have to live my life based on what my drugs and alcohol are telling me to do.
Sure.
Not based on what everybody else is telling me to do or what I can see with my own eyes. That is the horrific and glaring tragedy.
There goes the earbud.
Earbud. Yeah.
That's okay.
But as I was saying, that's the horrific and enduring tragedy of this disease, is that it has a strange mental blank spot that tells you don't have a disease. And so until confronted with circumstances that actually break that cycle, for which it is different for everyone, there is no known way to do that. They're just things that work better than other ways. We have, we endure the tragedies that we endure. I mean,
I agree.
There's lots of people, lots of names, come to mind. And by the way, we also, and again, this is not speculative, it's just statistical. There are a ton of deaths that are marked down as stroke or heart attack, or some other cause of death, when in fact the cause of death actually is chemical dependency and alcoholism that created the stroke or the heart attack.
Exactly.
So it is a very, very very, very difficult topic for a lot of people, myself included.
My counterpoint to that is people don't think they're taking fentanyl. People think they're taking a Percocet or a Xanax or another drug, but it is laced with fentanyl. That's why I call it. I think people are. Yeah, it's the poisoning.
This is what street drugs do. I mean, you can say the same thing about some of the additives that are placed into other chemicals. Fentanyl being because it's so strong, and because international narco cartels have access to this, it can be put into something at a much cheap. It's cheaper to put fentanyl into something to make it stronger, than to actually sell a more street clean or street pure drug, right? And hence the explosion in the use of fentanyl in street drugs all over America.
So when you were doing your show and you saw cultures that use different substances in their rituals and lifestyles, how were you able to balance that?
What do you mean?
Like the bizarre foods. I'm sure you saw different cultures that used stimulants.
Oh, tons.
Yeah.
But what do you mean
How
by
did you
how was I able
personally keep yourself balanced during that time?
You mean to not want to use?
To not want to use, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's really very simple. I mean, I think right around the corner from where I'm sitting is a rack that holds a lot of wine that I use to cook with and I use to entertain here at the house. I could not have alcohol in my house until I was about 15 years clean. It just, at various points, it would talk to me, and I just was not going to risk any of that. I think that for me, when traveling, and I've been around, I mean, I've been in some very bad places around some very large piles of some very, very bad drugs. I have also been with First Peoples, indigenous peoples who were using some of the strongest hallucinogenics. I've been with tribal peoples in the Amazon basin of Bolivia, where they are, they create cocaine pastes to smoke and things like that. I mean, I've been around, seen it all. I've been in the Golden Triangle. I've been in, back alleys in Chinese cities and wandered into opium cooking facilities. I mean, it just it happened more frequently than most people would imagine.
Wow.
And what I have found over the course of my sobriety is that when I am taking care of myself and taking my medicine, that other stuff is not an issue for me.
That's amazing. Congrats. Really.
Well, I mean,
It's
I
some
mean
strong
that.
willpower.
Well, it's interesting though. It really has. It's no willpower at all. I don't need to use
Wow.
willpower. Willpower, is, I prefer the term white knuckling. I don't want
Okay.
to white knuckle anything. Um,
Yeah, it's not
the
fun. It's not fun to white knuckle.
personally, I have, you know, the only way I know how to get sober is how I got sober, and that was, I went to treatment. Treatment delivered me into the hands of 12-step groups. 12-step groups told me to get mentorship in the form of sponsors.
Hmm.
Sponsors told me to work the steps of those 12-step groups and to be involved and to never stop. And as I moved through my sobriety, service work became more and more important to me. And when I am doing the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing, when I am actually living my recovery program, it's not even the thought to do it. I mean, put a pile of whatever in front of me. I have no desire. The problem is as if removed. I say is as if removed because it actually isn't removed. I just have the temporary reprieve, based on the work that I do each day, that helps to keep me safe. Um, it's my experience.
That's amazing. I thank you for sharing that. So tell us, how are you volunteering now with the recovery groups?
Wow, how am I not?
Okay.
You name it, I'm doing it. The I mean, it starts very simply in, are you attending 12-step groups, and are you sharing
Hmm.
at those 12-step groups? Are you sharing your experience, strength, and hope? Are you standing up and taking a cake on your anniversary or a chip and telling people how you did it? Those are all ways in which we spread the message and talk. Um, do we say yes anytime we receive a request from someone else to do service in our 12-step groups?
Ah,
100%. I mean, unless I'm going to be out of town and can't physically be somewhere to do something, I say yes to every request that comes in. Um, so that's kind of where it starts. Then there is, actual mentoring of others, and taking other people through the steps, driving newcomers to meetings, connecting people who need to be connected. I would say 3 times a week, my phone rings and it's someone in my industry telling me that they have a friend, or colleague that needs some love and attention, and using my network of contacts, and from interventionists to admissions people at treatment centers, we try to get people the help that they need. um, it also means doing little things. COVID sort of put a halt to in-person 12-step meetings
yeah.
for a while. But now that I go to them occasionally, it can be as simple as making coffee, putting away chairs, greeting people when they come in. I tell people all the time, greeting people at meetings is probably the most unheralded piece of service work in the recovering community. Because it allows you to connect with people. And I can't tell you how many folks, very few people thank you on the way out,
Hmm.
but years later, I mean, years. I remember the woman that greeted me at my first meeting in the Twin Cities, the night that I got out of Hazelden. And I'll never forget her. And I had the opportunity at 8, 9, 10 years sober to bump into her and thank her for giving me a hug and letting me know I was welcome. And I've had the opportunity to have people come up and share that same response with me. And it's a extremely rewarding piece of life, but it also is how I keep myself well.
That's great. So in the restaurant,
I forgot the most important part. There was a point in time in my recovery where I thought service work had to be done with other addicts and alcoholics for other addicts and alcoholics. And my sponsor told me, oh gosh, I was probably 6, 7 years clean. Pointed out to me that there's a phrase in our literature that, in 100 places it says do something for another alcoholic, but there's one very important place that it says do something for another human being, quote, because love and tolerance of others is our code. And he said, you could just push in someone's chair at work. You can empty a garbage can. You can hold a door open. You can call your mother more often. She'd love to hear from you, right?
Yeah.
My father, if I called my father more than once a week, he would say, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah,
We have a scheduled time. We speak every Wednesday night after dinner. My mother, on the other hand, if I called her 5 times a day, would find nothing wrong with it. She would just be happy as a clam. And so I made that part of my service work commitment. And so it doesn't even have to always be with other people who have sit in the same headspace as you are. You can be just a better global citizen. And I've now applied that idea of service to all the other things that I do with, my national and international work on hunger, on food waste, on food systems, and all the other stuff I do. I actually ramped it up because of that. I can be of tremendous service in those places.
Since you're talking about family, how do you talk to your children about drugs and alcohol?
Don't have to.
Really? Why? How?
Yeah.
Then tell us.
Well, I mean, I'm lucky. I mean, occasionally there are unintentional beneficial consequences of having a story as horrific as mine with a happy ending to date.
Okay.
And that is that, my child grew up in a household where this was talked about all the time. Guys I sponsored were coming and going. There was recovery talk every night. I would be reading to him sometimes at night when he was a little kid, and the phone would ring and it would be a certain person. I'd say, dude, I have to take this. And he has heard my story a gazillion million times, right? Everyone in my home, it's going to happen tonight at, what's today, Friday? Today's Friday?
Yeah, it's Friday.
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours after I hang up with you, I will be attending, one of my meetings that I'm pretty religious about. And that's, sometimes it's attraction, not promotion, right? And so, the young people in my life, and especially my son, know exactly where I stand in all this. I have done all the parental teaching and then some, at probably a factor of about 1,000, a multiple of about 1,000, only because it is a very regular topic in our house. A lot of other parents are afraid to talk about these things.
Yes.
For me, it was like I had to talk about them all the time. Otherwise, I was going to go crazy. You're only as sick as your secrets. So one of the unintended consequences of that has been a keen understanding. Now, what he chooses to do with that is up to him. By the same token, one of the other benefits of having been, I mean, I'm nice and soft and cuddly now, but I used to be a very, 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 very bad person. And with jails and institutions and psych wards, and you name it, it's happened. And so consequently, my bullshit detection system is pretty finely attuned. So I'm counting on that to help if friends, family get into trouble. It's pretty reliable.
That's good. We now that I've been working in the naloxone space, my kids hear all the podcasts. They know what Narcan is, what you should never take anything from someone that isn't your medicine, those types of things. So now that's sort of regular in our household, which it wasn't
1,000%.
before, just because even though I didn't even drink coffee till I had children. So like sparkling water didn't exist in my life until children, very plain. But now this is just part of what we talk about around the table a lot. But I want to talk about restaurants because I am from West Virginia, lived then in Washington, D.C. when we got married for a time. Really enjoyed the restaurant scene there before we moved back. It's West Virginia's rural, so it's not the same type of dining scene. But occasionally we take our kids in, and I did get our boys to eat like these fish eyeballs.
Nice.
Recently, it went okay. They're pretty good. They the foie gras. I've always described that. I've called that butter. I'm just like, it's a different type of animal butter. You put it on bread. They love it.
Good comparison.
Yeah, right? I just call it animal butter, and they ate it as they were young. And once they're used to eating it as they're young, they just keep with it. So
it's a very expensive habit. Good luck with that.
It's only like once a year. No. Maybe we should start growing our own geese. Now I'm kidding. But we've come across people back when we lived there who definitely struggled in the industry with addiction. And I think it might be a little more prevalent there than, say, in accounting or librarians. But what are your thoughts?
I don't know. Accountants and librarians, they keep a lot of secrets. I'm suspicious of accountants and librarians. Those,
they know what you've checked out, Andrew. They know what you're reading.
Those are the places that people go to hide as well. Everyone is very famously in the habit of quoting the higher than the national average alcoholism rates, suicide rates, drug addiction rates within restaurant communities. However, I don't know of an industry that is doing as much to help its employees as the restaurant industry. I disagree very strongly with the only because I've seen the transition over the course of my lifetime.
Sure.
With the idea that restaurants tolerate or breed this kind of thing. It's quite the opposite, despite the fact that when I first showed up in the earliest 80s, in this industry, sure, was drinking more acceptable on shift, after shift? Yes. At one point in the 80s in restaurants that I was at did cocaine show up pre-shift courtesy of owners who were like, here's a little sign to help everyone get through a 12-hour, Saturday night? Sure. But those things have gone the way of, the dodo bird. They just doesn't happen really anymore. But it's not that the restaurant industry foments that type of behavior. What I think is very unique about the restaurant industry is that it's the largest employer of first-time job seekers and last-time job seekers. It's the largest employer of returning citizens, people who are leaving jails and institutions. It's the largest employer of new citizens. It's also the largest employer of immigrants, legal and not.
Sure.
It is single moms, single dads. I mean, it is a very, very unique population that makes up the core of the restaurant labor force. Now, yes, high-end Michelin-starred restaurants are very professionalized, and they have lifers in there, and they have much better pay structures and benefits and all this other kind of stuff. But the average restaurant and the average place, when you just get down to, the average American eatery, I think it's the special population. And by that, I mean, we have created subclasses here in America where we are not doing enough to support them. And I believe that restaurants employ a larger percentage of those special populations that we're not doing enough to support than other industries. And that is that's horrific. We have over 11 million people employed just in the independent restaurant community. Forget about chains and hotels and, bowling alleys that serve food and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But, just independent restaurants, 11 million people. Independent restaurants alone are over 5% of GDP. Pretty shocking. When you connect all the other pieces of the food system in there, there's the Defense Department and then there's food. I mean, that's it. And I think we need to be doing more at the federal, state, and municipal levels to support people who are working in food, because they are the vast majority of them are from special populations that we have been routinely letting down and disappointing year after year after year.
Vulnerable
populations. We make it harder for single moms, for example, to work and access affordable health care and access affordable child care and all the other things. And, so these are people who use all sorts of things as coping mechanisms because they've been fucked over for generations. And, and that includes new Americans, and that includes last time job seekers. I mean, America is the place where we take old people and push them away so that we don't have to look at them. It's a horrific habit. Other countries don't do that. It's just us. It's just us. And so I really think we need to look not at the restaurant industry and say, what are you doing in restaurants that's causing this problem? We need to be looking at what are we doing to take away benefits, safety nets, and access to care for the populations that make up the majority of food service workers. I'm on the board of several organizations that deal with these issues. Most notably, I'm on the board of directors of Giving Kitchen, which is a national organization based out of Atlanta that helps food service workers in crisis. And I think it's a very important distinction to make. It's not like if you take a shoe shop and all of a sudden you start making grilled cheese that you're going to have a problem. It's who comes to work in a place where you're making grilled cheese,
No, I am a big advocate of, especially in addiction, providing naloxone through the government. We need to have better treatment. Like 30 days is not enough to get over some addictions, but that's, what's all that's covered sometimes.
Yep.
And then it's like, good luck. And then we'll judge you. And then we'll judge you if you lapse.
I had really good health insurance in the early 90s that allowed me to get half of my treatment paid for. And that was very rare back then.
That's amazing.
And it was only half. It's worse now. Insurance doesn't pay for it. If you break your arm and you don't have money, the hospital still sets the limb for you. we need to have state and federally funded treatment for everyone who wants it. Treatment works. Treatment works. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 times.
Right.
But if you told someone who was dying of cancer, well, we're going to put you on radiation and a couple other things, it's going to take 3, 4, 5 times, but we've got a 70% chance of you surviving, they would take it every time, and they'd line up an hour before the appointment starts.
Exactly. No, there's too much judgment and stigma in addiction. So, well, we are coming up on an hour. Do you have anything else you'd like to share, Andrew?
No, thank you for a great conversation. I appreciate it tremendously.
This was an honor. Thank you for coming on The Poisoning.
My pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode, I ask you to rate, review, and share this show with a friend.